Hi, I'm Tilo Young, and this is Small Jobs. Hi, I'm Tilo, and welcome to the shop. Today I'm here with my lovely wife, Anastasia, who is producing a new show called Agree to Argue. Tell them a little bit about your show.
All right. Well, I am the producer, showrunner, ringmaster for Agree to Argue, which is a live stream show on YouTube. It airs once a month live, and then we upload clips every week from the live stream. And the whole premise of the show is kind of unique in the fact that it's not a Christian show. It is not an atheist show. But we have a non-theist, as he prefers to be called, doesn't have the vitriol and venom that usually is attached to the term atheist. So we have an atheist co-host and we have a Christian co-host. And the whole purpose of the show is to engage difficult topics and to learn each other's worldviews, to actually have some curiosity to learn about the other side and not just like throw information out there or be vitriolic. That's why the show is called Agree to Argue, just to show that you can disagree with somebody and know that there's a person behind the principle.
You know, it's funny, the term argue has such negative connotations to most people, and there's nothing really negative. It's something that, in its essence, is just putting forth your best case and then putting forth theirs and grappling with concepts and seeing who can propose the better ideas and what problems there are in the other person's ideas. Arguing is not a bad thing. I think what we call arguing in a negative way, there's a place where it can become futile, but that's not what the term really means.
No, we actually went back and forth on the name because of that, because the true meaning of the name means to press in and to unpack ideas. What is your best argument?
Right.
One of the scholars that I work with, he's hilarious. He said that he's into apologetics, and he told his son who wanted to go to a basketball game. He says, I'm inclined to tell you no, but give me your best argument as to why I should let you go. And he says, because I really want to go. and this guy was laughing like, where did that come from? And he's argument. Okay, so there has to be anger behind it. No, that's not what an argument is. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not something that has to be, again, laced with vitriol. It's just putting forth your case.
As you know, and other people don't, quite a few years ago, I had kind of decided that if I wanted to be able to share my faith with other people, I was going to encounter people that had problems with the faith. I myself was an atheist at one time. And before I could sit and listen to the gospel, I had some challenges and real problems that I needed answered. And once those got answered, then I kind of sat back. And I remember I literally did that. I sat back and I said, okay, now tell me what you believe. Because I threw out like a really hard challenge. And I said, now I'm ready to hear you present your argument for a positive argument for the faith now that you've answered my challenge. And that being the case, it kind of occurred to me, here we're in my shop, that if I were going to send somebody to you, if God's going to send somebody to you that needs to hear about him, if someone's going to send you to me in my shop, I need to have the right equipment and the right knowledge to be able to deal with that issue, whatever it is. And so the more tools and knowledge I can put in that toolbox, the more broad my ability to help somebody, to serve somebody is. And so I applied this and said, the more I learn about my faith, the more different people I'm going to be able to encounter to help share the faith.
And that's why I'm glad we're doing this, because in our conversation, I had shared with you some pushback from surprisingly Christians about Agree to Argue, not so much from the atheists. And that was, they wanted to know what's the point. What is the point of Agree to Argue if the non-theist has already clearly said he's not interested in accepting Jesus into his heart? But, you know, so why give him a platform to put forth his ideas? And this is really where we started getting into the nuts and bolts, where Christians aren't even showing up to watch the show because they have no interest in it. And I was really, really disheartened that there wasn't any interest. But you were bringing up that the practical aspect of hearing from somebody in that school of thought, not being in an echo chamber with Christians who think they know what atheists think and how they believe and why they hold the views that they do. But you kind of threw yourself into the deep end, into these atheist communities that were like, actually, they were vitriolic and tested you by fire. So that's the part I really want to dig into, is what was that experience like? Why go to the atheist community to learn how to share the gospel? That seems like a weird place.
That's the question, and I've gotten from so many people, like, why would you waste your time with them? And they're not listening, and I would be like, if I were going to find somebody that I wanted to convert to Christianity, back in those days, this will kind of date me, I was doing this on MySpace. MySpace had religion and philosophy debate forums. And to this day, the people I encountered there gave better arguments, challenges, were more nuanced and in-depth than the big name atheists that people look at today. And it's funny because I would say, like, if I were looking for somebody to convert, that's the dead last place I would go. Maybe second last would be Facebook or social media. I mean, this isn't where you go to find somebody who wants to hear the gospel and convert.
So why?
Well, having said that,
Yeah.
you never know if there are other people watching or listening that might be influenced by what you're saying that you'll never even know about. So that's a possible aside, but that's not my objective. So my objective was to gain the challenges to my beliefs that would teach me what I need to research and learn so I can share my faith with people who have these same challenges. And if you want to find out where your weaknesses are in your belief system as a Christian, if you go to an atheist, in this case a non-theist, but forum, they will literally devote their lives to teaching you what the problems are in what you believe.
How many within the communities that you interacted with were deconverted former Christians?
Virtually every last one.
So they were very, very, it's not like they hadn't been exposed to the scriptures, that they hadn't been exposed to any of the arguments.
No, virtually everyone had grown up in some form of Western evangelical church, once in a great while a Catholic, and then left and were very adamantly opposed to the faith. And so I went on there and I spent 2 years of 4 to 8 hours a day, and my poor wife knows, 7 days a week on those debate forums. And I'll be honest, when I began it, I was shaken hard. And I would get hit by challenges and questions that rattled me. But I had enough familiarity to know who kind of the better names were in Christian apologetics. So right away I'd go order a book. And usually I'd just read a chapter that dealt with this. Or, go research and find a couple of articles and say, what's the Christian answer to this question? This is a bad one. And I'll tell you, for the first at least year, I would be terrified when I would go turn on my computer. Like, I was like, what am I going to see? And I was like scared. And after really being into it for quite some time, that fear started to leave. And I started to have an expectation that when I see a new question I hadn't considered before, there is going to be a really good answer out there. And I just got to go find it. And I knew it was there. And so that made me feel a lot more confident and comfortable. But this is a curve, and this takes time. This isn't something that happens overnight. But the people, it was kind of funny, the people on the debate forums knew me as somebody who, and this may come as a shock to some of you, that was very polite and well-spoken. And
As a matter of fact, you kind of disallowed
yes,
any
I had rules.
hostile.
So I was very clear up front. I said, I am here to gain challenges against my faith, which will teach me what I need to research. I am here to test other faiths and beliefs for external application to the world that we observe and internal consistency within itself as a system. And so these are my goals, and my boundaries are if there's a lot of vulgarity, vitriol, if
Ad
there's
hominem, if they're attacking you and not staying on
anything
topic.
that was like, okay,
Yeah.
this is either futile or too angry, then I would disengage. And I would say, I'm sorry, I'm out, and I would go engage with somebody else. And so I actually became known for this. And there were quite a few atheists that were pretty brutal with some other people who were actually really, really chill when they talked to me.
Yeah, actually, in the organization that I'm at, we see the same thing where the overarching philosophy and ethos is from 1 Peter 3:15, that always have an answer prepared, but to present it with gentleness, respect, and a clear conscience. And really, people in the atheist and non-theist communities have been surprised at how reasonable we are, not attacking. But along the lines of why, let's go back to that. A whole year of you approaching a keyboard with fear, and you said that your goal was not conversion, was not to convert these people, but to learn.
To fill my toolbox.
So I'm wondering, like, if this is an idea that people could come to our show to hear from the non-theist community.
I think there are 2 points of value. The first one being getting exposed to some of the areas of disagreement and some of the arguments on both sides. Now, you're not going to watch this show and then walk away and say, I'm ready to go engage in debate with somebody, or, I'm ready to go answer anybody's challenges, but they're great intros. And then that can kind of prompt a little bit more in-depth understanding. So yeah, it's not going to be like, now I'm ready, but what it does is it gives you a thumbnail picture of 2 sides of an argument, and it also gives you a model.
Right.
A model of how 2 people can sit down and be in disagreement and discuss these matters and walk away friends. And I've always really believed that where Paul said one plants a seed, another waters, you don't know. When you talk to somebody, if you would have talked to me when I was 22, you would have said, this guy is so anti-Christian atheist, he's the wrong guy to talk to. And a matter of months later, I was an evangelical Christian going to Bible studies 7 nights a week. So you don't know what impact you're having on people, but being able to sit down and engage, to do the back and forth, but you have to also have the information. And you're not going to get that information just by reading one side. That's not the best way to learn. I know that there's a lot of criticism at our universities today, that they give you one side of things to memorize and regurgitate back to them and they say, now you know it. And in my view, no.
Don't we do that even in the Christian community, though?
Yes.
Here's the silver bullet: how to shut an atheist down.
Yes.
Like, ask them this, or confront
Yes.
them with that. It's again, it's memorize this thing, not listen and hear and find out what the nuances are as to why they are
And
holding
there's a
certain view.
lot of back and forth grappling that goes on there.
Right.
That, you don't just like, aha, here it is, but then this person's going to come back with challenges and you have to answer those, and you have to get into an ongoing dialogue with the person. And sometimes this goes on for a prolonged period. But being able to just sit down with somebody And you know that I've done this countless times with strangers. And when somebody might be inquiring into our faith, it's typically a 4-hour sit down.
At least, yeah.
That's the average.
But why? Why is it a 4-hour sit down?
Because when they ask a question, it's not simply, here's your one-liner zinger. I build a foundation from the bottom up to show how this understanding fits in with as part of a comprehensive framework of thought that actually is quite coherent.
And you also have to know where they're coming from.
Yes.
So
Yes, you have to listen and hear their side of things and be able to answer those questions and to be able to throw questions back at them. Because it's not just you understanding your side. Again, the criticism on the school systems, once you think you have an understanding, you have to go against somebody who has a different understanding, who not only is challenging yours, but you can go back and challenge his. It's both sides. There's a deconstruction that has to happen. You don't just go from believing nothing to believing in this. Usually you have an existing set of beliefs. Mm-hmm. And those, in order for these to be true, in many cases, some of those have to be false. And so that requires some deconstruction. So you have to hear the other person and be able to help show them, okay, here's how I'm deconstructing this thought, and here's my thought for you to try and deconstruct. And this is how dialogue works. This is how we move forward in understanding.
I want to touch on something with your 2 years of engaging in these conversations. You said basically that you went from apprehension to anticipation. You went from I'm scared crapless to I can't wait to find out what the answer is to this. But in that time, did you find that there, in the atheist and non-theist communities, that there are myriads and myriads of questions, or did you find that it's usually the same things repeated over and over again? And I want to know, because you're talking about MySpace time, has that information been useful now?
So the answer to the question, is it, just a few things or a lot of things? The answer is yes, both. So there are a lot of detailed individual questions, but they tend to fall within just a few categories.
Give me an example of just one category.
So the moral argument, can there be morality without God?
Okay.
The argument
We
about...
just did a video on that one.
Yeah,
We just did one, yeah.
the argument about design, is this universe, does it look like it's designed?
Problem of evil.
Problem of evil
Is a huge
is
one.
actually one of the biggest ones I will encounter. That was mine, as a matter of fact, as an atheist, was the problem of evil. The evil I saw around me and the suffering I felt inside. How can there be a good God if I'm experiencing this and I see this everywhere else? So yeah, they do tend to fall within a few categories, and that's what actually prompted me to reach my end of that season. Was they were just small variants on the questions I'd already
So more
grappled with.
nuanced,
Yeah.
not something that was completely new.
No,
but-
just variants. And I was like, okay, I think I've covered this well enough. And now I can, sit down and discuss with people. But back to the original question, why would you guys do this and give a platform to an atheist? When we sit down, evangelism is giving a platform to an atheist. At a lunch table, at a picnic bench, or maybe it's to, a Buddhist or whatever other belief system. But that's exactly, St. Paul gave a platform to the Gentiles. And that platform is, you're going to sit down with me and with the Jews in the synagogues. So there was the platform. And
Jesus did the same when
Jesus
he
did
sat
the
and
same.
ate with the tax collectors and sinners.
yeah, so that's where you sit down, you present ideas, and you grapple. Yes, that's what evangelism is giving a platform. And seeing somebody do it well.
Have we changed it in our mind to the guy on the corner with the bullhorn? That's evangelism is a one-way impartation.
Unidirectional, yes, absolutely. And it's like, I'm going to present this, and then if you reject it, then I'm done with you and I'm walking away.
Right.
And, I often get kind of emphatic about this because I was that atheist. And if you would have sat with me and tried to present to me, Jesus died for your sins, I would have fired back really harshly at you. And I would have thrown a really hard challenge at you about this problem of evil. Now, if you weren't able to respond to that, you would have said, well, you know what? I tried. I offered him the gospel and he rejected it. I'd still be there. I wouldn't be a Christian. But it was somebody who actually did answer that question in a way which, for me at the time, was satisfactory. And that, I really believe apologetics cannot get you to the kingdom. But what they can do is remove the obstacles.
Right.
So like, there's the narrow path. Well, there are blockades on that path. And so these kind of remove the blockades, so now I can see the path and walk the path.
Right.
And so they're an important pre-evangelism step. And there's no hard line between that and evangelism. There's a mixture of evangelism within it. But really, I think it's important to understand that there is a value to this engagement, even if it doesn't look like there's a value. And if it's always about this guy in front of me, you're missing a great opportunity. Because what you're missing is being able to refine arguments, to gain challenges, to learn things that are going to be useful later.
Right.
I've got a garage full of equipment here, and so much of it I bought when I never needed it.
Right.
I've actually got some tools that I think I probably never, ever used.
But
One day, when I need that tool, it'll be indispensable.
right.
And I knew it when I bought it. So that's why, instead of just buying a few wrenches, I bought the whole set. Even if I never used, one of the sizes, still there will come a day when I very well could.
One of the things that I've learned through this process, because I basically threw myself neck deep into the atheist and non-theist communities, like whether it be Facebook forums or interviews that I help set up, hosts that I talk to, and even striking up some friendships with a non-theist and an atheist. And I've actually learned a lot in the fact of the co-host, he said that his experience with Christians is that they either want to convert or humiliate. And if they can't do the one, then they'll do the other. Again, the whole premise is exactly what you said. If I can't convert you, then I can make an example of you by humiliating you, decimating your arguments.
I'm not so sure that may be the motive in the humiliating. I think very often it's fear. I think that if I don't have good answers and I don't have some good things to present, it's going to put me on shaky ground, especially if you offer better arguments than I have. You're going to put me on shaky ground. So what am I going to conclude? Well, I have to classify you in some way that's going to make what you said not valid.
Right.
And so the humiliation that you're an idiot, if I can get you into that classification, okay, now I'm safe.
Now I'm safe. Okay.
And so I think, again, where your show is so valuable is to show that you don't have to be afraid of these things.
Right.
Yes, you will be. And I can tell you right up front, when you start engaging in apologetics, you will be afraid. And you will get embarrassed sometimes. Because you will get hit with things that you don't have an answer to. And that's going to happen.
And then what do you do?
You go research. You say, you know what? I don't have a good answer for that. Imagine that. I don't have a good answer. But you know what? Give me some time, and I'll get back to you. I'm going to go look into that more.
I think one of the good things about this show, too, is that you as the viewer, you kind of get to be anonymous. There's a live chat. So you can say your stuff, you can ask your questions, and you can posit questions to either host, depending on your worldview. And but you're not the one going to get called to task on it. So it's kind of a nice anonymous way to sneak in there and
How
learn
many
something.
times have you and I talked to young cops or others, and they're scared to death to engage?
Yeah.
And they say, you know, what happens if I ask or say something?
yeah.
Well, here's your chance to ask and say it, and you won't have to be the one that has to, you know, accept the challenge back to you,
Right.
and defend it.
Right.
You're able to, like you say, anonymously just go throw that question, that challenge out there.
And another thing that I feel very strongly about with this show or with any engagement with somebody that is not a Christian is that it's not entirely about making them a project. Nobody wants to feel like a project. And
when I feel like I can't convert you, off
then
you go.
Then off
I'm going
you
to
go.
scrap that project.
Or any engagement with you, I'm just going to tell you about the Lord. I'm just going to tell you about the church. I'm just going to, like, every engagement is going to be all about that, because that is my end goal. That is the whole sole purpose of my interacting with you, is just that.
And it's always about sealing the deal, right?
It is about sealing the deal.
It's not just like, hey, you know what? I might be adding water here to a seed someone else planted, or I might be planting a seed. It's like, no, if I don't get you to come forward and say your prayer with me to sign on the dotted line,
Right.
then I didn't seal the deal. You know, like the salesman at your house.
But in Orthodox and Protestant Christianity, there is something that is pervasive that we forget. That all of humanity is created in God's image. Every single one of us. If we don't know him, if we know him and reject him vehemently, you can't escape the fact that you're made in his image. You said that as an atheist, one of your biggest problems was the problem of evil. That right there is God's fingerprint on you, that you look at things that are unjust. You look at things that should not be happening. You look at how humanity is treating each other. And that's, again, like my atheist friend is, oh my gosh, he's got the biggest heart. So my engagement with him, when I go and I sit with him and I, break bread and we have burgers together, it's not all about, well, let me tell you about Jesus. It's like, I value him as a human being made in God's image, and he's not a project to me.
I'm with you. I think the show is a great resource for people to observe how it's done from the safety of their home.
Behind the keyboard courage, right?
Yes.
Can't beat keyboard courage.
And to be introduced to these ideas, I think it's invaluable. I mean, when you learn something, like in a class, in a trade school, when you're learning something that you're actually going to do, there's the instructional portion, but then usually you're watching somebody else demonstrate how to do it.
Yes.
And then you have to start doing it yourself and have somebody else.
Trial and error.
Yes, and then
mistakes.
get corrected when you make the mistakes. This is all part of the process.
Right.
So I think that rather than simple apologetic sources that say, here are the arguments, go use them.
Right.
You really, I can tell you that when I say I understand something, if I have actually put my hands on and done it, my understanding of it is 10 times greater than when I just mentally learned it. It's whether it's something in the shop, whether it's apologetics. People get kind of surprised, when we give talks. Mm-hmm. I never use notes. I don't take notes. I don't have a plan. And I tell them my preference is open question and answer. Anything you want, open question and answer. And that's not because I've read this thing. It's actually because I've argued it with somebody. That's what takes the thing I've read and solidifies it within me, that I don't need to make preparation now because I've argued it actually at length, back and forth with a number of people and seen the responses. And I've, come to a conclusion, said, you know what? There aren't any really good, compelling responses in my view to some of these things. Those are the solid things I'm keeping.
Right.
And there were a few of these things that, there was actually a really good argument against it. That's not what I'm putting on my solid list, so I can set that one aside. But by the time I sit down and talk with you, I've already argued this 10 times. And so having a platform where you can watch people actually argue it and see what it looks like and hear both sides of the argument, the value of it is in preparation for you to be able to go out and engage and do the same.
Oh, I greatly, greatly appreciate our conversation. You being willing to sit down and talk with me about Agree to Argue and about your experiences and about how they overlap. And
It's not easy to get you in the shop.
I know, right? But just the value of not always imparting, but sometimes showing up to learn what are the arguments on the other side. Have a curiosity. Find out from the horse's mouth instead of in your echo chambers. And as we wrap up, I want to ask you: have you encountered, after all of this engagement you've done, all of the nuances you've learned, how you've learned some of these arguments, forwards and backwards, have you heard from Christian resources or Christian people respond to something where you could tell they obviously did not understand the argument and their response was abysmal, and if that was the only thing that the other person walked away with was their little trite, God said it, I believe it, that settles it, type thing. Have you experienced that
All
where
the
you're
time.
like, you don't even, like, you're almost defending the other guy going, you don't even hear what he's saying?
Not almost, I actually do.
Oh, have you?
Oh, all the time. Yes,
Okay.
I will jump in if I think somebody is presenting a very bad argument. I will jump in on the other side and challenge their argument. I've had quite a few people who probably think I don't believe the Bible is true.
Yes.
I have quite a few
Yes.
people who probably think I'm...
Is this guy even a Christian?
Yes.
I've gotten that
Yes.
about myself. Yes.
Yeah,
Is this
because-
person a Christian or not?
Yes, because you know what? It's the argument itself. If it's
Yes.
a bad argument, it's a bad argument, and I'm
Yeah.
willing to step in and say so.
Well, very cool. Thank you so much for this. And I hope that people check us out on YouTube. That if they just go search for Agree to Argue, they can find us. Or if you can go to our website, agreetoargue.com. And I hope to see people engaging out there. And really
I've
checking
I've
this out.
spent a small but decent amount of time with Steve from the show,
Yes.
who's the non-theist. I love the guy.
Yeah, he's great.
I'd love to just and I did love just hanging out with him.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to all be about apologetics or whatever. Just a great guy that is fun to talk to.
Yeah. And Fuzz is the same.
Oh, Fuzz is awesome. Fuzz
Just two
is-
guys.
Yes.
They're not these lofty. They're just two guys.
I
so.
personally
Yeah.
enjoy my time hanging out with Fuzz on Venice Beach
Yes.
more than I do our time discussing apologetics.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you guys for joining us, and I hope you do watch the show. I think it's a very important thing that we are lacking in the apologetics world is to be able to view good engagement, and I hope this helps some people to understand the purpose of giving a non-theist a platform to share his views. I hope you understand now the value of that to all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you so much. And I don't know, I kind of like your shop. Maybe I'll come again.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.